Good morning, everyone. I am super excited that you were joining me today for collaborating with faculty as a graduate student. So to get started, I just wanted to share a little bit about me. So I'm Catherine Kareores. I she, her pronouns. I'm currently a second-year graduate student in the Higher Education Administration and Student Affairs program here at the University of South Carolina, Columbia, our flagship campus. And I also serve as a graduate assistant with Residence Life. I'm the Assistant Residence Life Coordinator of the Green Quad Learning Community. It's one of our larger communities here on campus. Residence Hall that houses at full capacity about 500 first year and upperclassmen students and includes two of our learning communities. Both involve a lot of collaboration with faculty. So I'm going to dive into those a little bit more in another slide. I have had some awesome opportunities to get involved outside of residence life throughout my grad school career and found some other really big professional interests of mine include orientation, international education, and first year seminars. So also before I really jump in, just wanted to give a little plug for participation and engagement. I'm really hoping this can be like a fun, engaging presentation for everyone this morning. I know it's Friday morning, we're getting close to the end of SEAHO, but if anyone is interested in participating, please use the chat function, raise your hand throughout the presentation for questions, comments, things. I'm also hoping to have some time at the end for questions, so if you feel like saving them, definitely go ahead and do that as well. And I do have a couple parts of the presentation later on where I'll ask for some volunteers to share their own experiences with this topic. I'm sure for those of you who are in grad school or starting your professional careers, you may have had some experiences working with faculty, even if it's not quite in a residential capacity like we're really focusing on today. But yeah, definitely let me know if you have something you want to share. I'm going to try and keep an eye on that chat as well. I know Dylan's also going to be helping with that. So if I miss anything, please just let me know. Okay, so to really jump in, so why are we talking about this? Why was this something I wanted to present on? Really, my interest came from a mix of my classes. I was able to take an Introduction to Student Affairs class my first semester of grad school, and it really taught me a lot about the intersection of academic affairs, student affairs, how all of us, we are all in this one big campus, how do we work together? Or how sometimes do we, are we not working together and are we missing those opportunities? And then when I came into my assistantship here at the University of South Carolina, I jumped into a residential community with two very different kinds of communities that involve faculty members. So my primary community here within my building is our Green Learning community. It is a faculty principal-based community. So essentially that means we have our faculty principal, who's a tenured faculty member in our College of the Earth, Ocean, and Environment, who focuses on marine science. He teaches all of his, or most of his classes out of our learning center, which has classrooms and different facilities here in our building. And then he also works with an assistant principal who is a student affairs focused professional who does a lot of mentoring and other first year seminar type classes within the community. They also have a business manager and another graduate assistant who work really closely on their team with the overall goal of helping students to develop sustainable practices in a residential setting, prepare them for future success throughout college. And then this year, with some COVID things, we had to shift one of our communities, went offline to serve as our quarantine and isolation housing this year. So we had the opportunity to welcome the engineering and computing community, which is considered a living learning community. So we do have a faculty member associated with that. He is a little bit less involved. He still teaches all of his classes out of our engineering building, came in to do a first year type class here in our building, but that partnership looks a little bit different, where we have a lot more kind of freedom to take things on ourselves. Our resident mentors, so our version of RAs here at U of SC, are doing a lot of the engineering focused programming instead of quite the level of involvement that we have with our Green Learning community. So those two very different relationships really encouraged me to think more about like that overall relationship between academic and student affairs. So whenever I'm talking with either faculty member of my learning communities, like I see the same goals. Like we have the same goal of supporting students through graduation. We want to see them be successful, even if we're going about it in different ways. So I've also seen like some times when we could be working more closely together, but we're both so focused on our own goals. I mean, he's focused on, research and teaching his classes, and I'm really trying to make sure this building stays afloat. And we haven't always worked together as closely as we can. So really trying to work on this presentation gave me a lot of insight into where there's room for improvement in communication, collaboration, and just overall, how can we work better to support our students and make sure that in the middle of this crazy year, especially, they're having really great experiences in our residence halls. And then, so lastly, this year has been all about trying some new things. So that was really the mindset I went into, trying to plan events and work together with different campus partners. Just make sure that at the end of the year, these students say like, it wasn't an awful experience being on campus in the middle of a pandemic. All right, and of course, we've got some learning outcomes. So as a result of attending this presentation, I'm really hoping you'll all be able to explain the role of faculty in the university and in learning communities, identify some tips for building partnerships with faculty members, and then at the end of it, apply these tips presented to plan an event with a faculty member in a residential setting. Okay, so one of the places I really wanted to start off with is some background on faculty. So we have all taken classes with faculty at different levels, but how often are we actually thinking about where they're at in their professional career and how that affects a lot of the work that they do? So to reach tenure, which for most, potentially not all, but probably for a good chunk of faculty members, tenure is the goal. So to reach that goal, they must focus on 3 different tasks within the university. So typically those are teaching, research, and service. And the focus can be different at different universities. So here at the University of South Carolina, we're a Research One flagship institution. Research is a huge priority. But at other smaller private schools that aren't as research focused, teaching is probably the thing that takes up the most of their time. Service tends to be the smallest and can come in a lot of different forms, but typically is still an important role in the tenure process. Definitely not all faculty members are tenure track, and there are increasing numbers of adjunct or otherwise non-tenure track faculty, and there can be some pretty big consequences of this. So for example, here in Columbia, South Carolina, we have a number of institutions like outside of USC. We have a small private school. We have a technical college about 15 minutes from here. We have a couple of HBCUs. So if there's a faculty member and he's teaching a biology 101 class and he's an adjunct faculty and he's thinking, all right, this class ends at 1 o'clock and by 2, I have to be on the other side of campus ready to teach a completely different class. He's not really thinking about the time that he could spend building those connections with students or answering questions or like hanging out, getting a coffee with them in the way that another professor may be able to. So for someone who's adjunct, they're not having that same experience building that connection to the campus community. So that can really have a big impact on how the students build that relationship with the professor and his or her connection to the campus. And then something else to note, so typically only tenure and tenure track faculty are able to vote in the faculty senate, which can be a powerful resource on campus for faculty looking to make change. So one of the first ranks of faculty, other than an adjunct faculty, is typically assistant professor. So considered junior faculty, most likely to be, fairly recently out of a PhD program. You don't necessarily have academic freedom at this time because you're not at tenure yet. So that typically takes about 6 years, and then at the end of that 6th, you apply for tenure, have a year to go through the research that you've done, your teaching evaluations, and then at the end of that 7th, you actually apply for tenure, that 1-year review process. And this is really the opportunity for professors or faculty to become leaders in their field, to show that they know their stuff and that they're able to publish material and really show all that they know and their contributions to the field. So after that, say professor does their 7 years, goes ahead and gets tenure. Typically they move up to the rank of associate professor. They've developed those skills in 3 areas, so teaching, research, service, have established national reputation as a scholar. They've published in some pretty big articles, like pretty big journals across the country. They're able to maybe expand a little bit in their research. They have that academic freedom. And then the next step, which not everyone makes it to, is definitely like a distinguished role, a full professor. And at this point, they've probably published in some international journals, probably done a lot of conferences and traveling for their work, and really have established international reputation as a scholar. So there are also a lot of ways that faculty potentially have some opportunities to get involved outside of the classroom. So engagement in a learning community is typically going to fall under the their contributions to service to the university. There are a lot of creative ways that faculty can get involved, and this experience out of the classroom, potentially in a residential setting, is really an opportunity for them to share their expertise in a new and creative way and find some time to engage with students outside of a lecture hall, or in 2021 outside of a Zoom screen. Even if some events are virtual, like it's a very different kind of interaction, even if they're still kind of talking academics. Like for our engineering professor that we have here in our community, he's still going to do a lot of engineering in some way focused events. But if he's doing a lesson on how students can learn 3D printing design, that's very different than like a lesson that's actually like really academic focused that's going to come with a grade at the end of it. So something to consider when you're looking at finding ways to collaborate with faculty, think about if you have any linked courses within your community. That could be some built-in faculty that already care about engaging with students and are looking for ways to engage outside of the classroom. Invite them to stay for an event or do some grab and go type events. We've had a lot of luck here in my community doing just like, come stop by, pick up some snacks, chat with us for a little bit, and then go on your way. But that's still a chance for them to see a professor in a new light and say like, oh, like I didn't actually think about asking you this question that's kind of related to class, but like not 100% related to the material, but I know this is a thing that you study and I'd like to learn more about it. So definitely some cool ways for them to continue to build those relationships and have students like that want to come to them and want to have those conversations. And especially for our first year students, like having a professor in that kind of light can really make it a little bit less intimidating, especially for a student who's gotten used to those like large lecture hall classes, even more so for those Zoom classes where students aren't actually able to like even interact with a professor face to face. Okay, so I wanted to open this part up for all of you, for anyone who wanted to share some past experiences. So think about a time when you worked with a faculty member. So it could be inside, out of residence life, could be something from undergrad, an experience you had either in a class or just working with an extracurricular organization. So what went well, or what was an area of improvement, or what advice do you have for someone taking on a similar event? So for anyone who wants to share, feel free to drop it in the chat, raise your hand, just let me know. I would love to hear some of your experiences, if anyone would like to share. I've got one. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Hey, my name's Jay Carroll. I'm an RD here at Florida A&M, Florida Agricultural Mechanical University. My past experience I had with a faculty member was my undergrad years, which was a long time ago. When I put on a program where I had witnessed like a resident of mine that was being like, I want to target like say like bully or whatever, right? And it was like a live and learning community. So I reached out to the faculty member for my LLC at the time, and she reached out, and we ended up partnering, getting our counseling services and everything. Counseling services are um, dang, what's it called now? The diversity director, and they came in and they did a whole program about what bullying looked like in the college setting and things like that. Um, it went very well. I was in the freshman male hall. We had a good turnout. What I wish I would have done then, knowing what I know now, was to like probably continue as like follow up on trying to make sure things wasn't happening, or it could, continue to, it like just seemed like it swept under the rug and things like that. So
That's an awesome example. And I'm so glad you mentioned like the follow-up piece. So kind of moving into our next part of the presentation, I have some tips on how to like really plan some strong events and develop those partnerships with faculty. And follow-up can be a big part of that. But that's such an awesome example. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to share an experience, or at this point, any questions about any of the stuff I've talked about so far?
Hi, so my name is Zach. I use he, him, his pronouns from Mississippi State. I'm community director. I know one thing that we are really struggling with at Mississippi State is trying to get the faculty to buy into the live and learning communities that we currently offer to our students. And so I have not directly worked with faculty members, but my colleagues have worked with them. And some of the things that they noticed is the lack of buy-in that they give to the students. And so it's really hard to establish that partnership. And actually going into next year, I will be working with our Honors College LLC going into next year. And so I'm actually here to learn different tips and tricks in order to further that connection so that we can have a better relationship with the faculty members.
That's awesome. That is exactly why I'm here today. So like I said, our next part of the presentation, I've got a handful of tips that I think will be super helpful. And I definitely agree. I think buy-in can be one of the most difficult parts, especially for a faculty member who maybe is like involved in service to the university in other ways, like probably isn't even thinking that this residential like living learning community would even count as service. And I mean, to some extent, I think that would depend on the department, the university, like what division chairs, like department chairs are looking for. Because I think the typical idea of like service to the university can be like serving on selection committees or like search, just other kind of search processes, like for provost or president or something. And this may be, at least for some people, for some professors, some faculty, like a bit of a different experience, not exactly what they were thinking they were getting into. But from those that I've talked to, like if you can find that professor that really does care about like that one-on-one connection with students, that might not be the professor that teaches, the 300-person lecture halls and relies on the TAs a lot. But sometimes if you're just able to find that one that's looking to get out of the classroom, definitely not saying that's the easiest process to find, but I think that tends to be like the most, like the best fitting experience for a professor who's looking for that like very kind of different interaction with students outside of the classroom. But thank you so much to both of you for your input. I really appreciate that. Okay, so our next part of the presentation, some top tips for success to ensure a smooth collaboration. One of the first things, and I think both of you kind of in some way mentioned this, my first tip is definitely communicate early and communicate often. So if there's someone you're looking to plan an event with later on, or there's someone you're working with the living learning community, so there's kind of like that built-in faculty presence, build that relationship early on in the semester, even if it's just a casual stopping by their office. Hey, I just wanted to check in. I wanted to introduce myself. And then just start from there, develop that like casual rapport, and then going on from that, when you're looking to plan that event, you'll already have that established to say, hey, like this is what I'm thinking for an event. What are your thoughts on helping with this or getting involved with this? Then definitely planning events well in advance. I know that can be a little difficult with all of our restrictions, things in place right now because of COVID, but the farther in advance you're able to plan, the more time you have to communicate and work out all of the different aspects of this event. And then keep in touch frequently throughout the process. So if you say you're working on like the purchasing elements for it and you're able to get all the paperwork through and actually do the purchasing, keep them in the loop just so that they know, yep, planning's going well, we're on track. And then when they have updates, they'll be more likely to do the same. So you know that you're going to be ready to go when the time for the event rolls around. And then set up regular times to meet if that's how you best communicate. That doesn't have to be, with different schedules, especially those of you who are grad students, may not be working full time, but find that method of communication that works best for you. So for our faculty principal community here in Green Quad, our living learning green learning community, we find that regularly scheduled meetings typically work best for us and our group. For our ECC, our engineering community, we do more emails, keep in touch that way. It's just with our schedules, it's been a little bit more difficult to find times to meet, but we still are able to keep each other in the loop through those emails. And then for schools that use Microsoft, Microsoft Teams has been an awesome update for us to be able to keep in touch that way, kind of a little bit more informally, but still great communication. I'm not sure what Google looks like if they have similar like options like that, but Teams has worked great for us. And then another piece of it is definitely setting expectations. So think about who is going to take on each part of the planning process. So some things that I was thinking about were definitely just overall planning. Hopefully that's something you're working on together. Some outreach to other offices, administrative work, purchasing, marketing, assessment, even things like setup and cleanup. You're working on some of those bigger aspects. You might not be thinking about, all right, who's actually going to be there to set up at the beginning of the event? Say you've got an event planned from 3 to 5 and then 5 o'clock rolls around. You're thinking it's the end of the day and everyone's ready to pack up and go home, but no one's actually thought about who's going to be breaking down the tables and taking out the trash and things like that. So definitely important to consider even those little things that might not be the first ones on your mind. And then another top tip to plan a smooth collaboration is definitely sharing your purpose. So a big piece of that is explaining your role within the residential community. So give them a good idea of what your day-to-day role looks like. Explain the work that you do with your undergraduate staff, how you're following up with students and building those relationships with the students in your residence hall. And I think especially as a graduate student too, for those of you who are still graduate students, the faculty members may not have a lot of experience working with graduates kind of outside of a classroom setting, potentially outside of those who are engaging in research or serving as teaching assistants. Like our role in a residential community is definitely a little bit different from that. And be upfront that if you're a graduate student, you're likely not working 40 hours a week. So kind of just set those expectations, like help them understand that, no, I'm not in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Here is when I'm available. Definitely want to keep in touch. But then they know like when you're in class, so they know they're not calling you when you're in the middle of a class. And then be clear on how they fit into the overall purpose of the community. So for our green learning community, our faculty principal plays a huge role. His events draw some of the highest attendance in any part of our community. So if we're able to loop him into an event, like we know it's going to be a success because he's super popular and our students just love being able to interact with him. And then give them an overview of your colleagues and your student staff. So I found that our faculty principal and our living learning community team, they love getting to know our resident mentors. They're the ones who really have the most insight into what our students are interested in. And they really value the feedback that our resident mentors have when looking at different themes for events or even like times and dates. Like they know when our students are in class and when they're most likely to be willing to attend that event. And then ask about their roles and responsibilities too, especially for those who are in more established living learning communities. Like how are they planning to either do events on their own within their community or like how else do they engage throughout the university? And then a big piece, something I have definitely kept in mind this year, with some of our enhanced restrictions, know your policies. So student affairs professionals and grads may operate under different policies and faculty, especially those with tenure. So definitely be clear on what is and what is not allowed in residence halls or other areas where you plan to host an event. Like I said, especially true in the time of COVID. So like one example, here at the University of South Carolina with our enhanced restrictions, we are being asked to only order food through our university catering company. And when we have faculty, we're like, oh, but let's just order Domino's. It's kind of going back to like, unfortunately, we're not able to do that this semester, but our university catering company has been awesome about trying some new things. Like I can reach out to them and set something up. I know we'll still be able to have a great event and like have snacks and have food and different things. So just know what is possible in a residential setting, maybe a little bit different than in a classroom. And if you're able to like bring those policies with you earlier on in the setup, you'll be set up for success. Other things like more COVID specific, definitely like physical distancing requirements. You'll want to make sure you have spaces set up like well in advance so you're not like running around with that at the last minute, maximum occupancy, and even things like tracking attendance. And then definitely taking a more creative approach, think outside the box, even with who you're collaborating with. So you don't have to work with someone who is just part of your living learning community. These events are a great way for students to build connections with professors outside of a classroom. So some of the things like I've heard of or seen of in the past is definitely like creating a series of career or internship nights for different majors. So that might involve, here in our green learning community, we have a good mix of STEM students, but also we tend to have a strong business population who are really interested in finding ways to incorporate sustainable practices into their business courses and overall like what they're looking for in a business career. So we might be able to reach out to some different business professors who have experience working with sustainable corporations. And then give the professors an opportunity to be a guest expert. So have them come into the residence hall, give a presentation, or even just like open the floor up for a Q&A for students to learn more, ask those kinds of questions that they're not able to ask in a classroom when they're really focused on like getting through that lesson for the day. And I think kind of going back to what I was mentioning earlier in the presentation, that's a really awesome way for students to feel more comfortable just approaching a faculty member. Very different than in a setting, a small residence hall event versus somewhere where they're in a major lecture hall, like they don't want to ask that question in front of a bunch of other students, but they'd feel a little more comfortable going up in a one-on-one setting. And then definitely use your resources. So like a couple have mentioned earlier on, you might be super interested in collaborating, but not know where to start. And I think for those of you who are grads, new professionals, like that's 100% reasonable. It's not something we typically do on a day-to-day basis. We're reaching out to faculty, especially those like who aren't the faculty members of our own program. So look to some of your other campus partners, like within student affairs, within even residence life, for those of you that work in res life. So ask like, what have they done in the past? And then do they have anyone in mind who's been an awesome partner that they've worked with in the past who could like assist with a particular event? So some that I've reached out to in the past and have had some awesome luck with, definitely the Office of Undergraduate Research. So if you know you have a group of students who are interested in getting involved with a research project, that can be a pretty like intense process, like a little bit of an intimidating process for especially our first year students that want to get involved but don't really know where to start. They're the ones who can walk a student through the process, help them understand what that application looks like, where to go from there. And the Student Success Center as well. They typically have undergraduate students who work really closely with faculty and other opportunities for students to get involved and build those relationships with faculty. And then don't discount others in your department as well. So maybe look to a professional staff, an assistant director, or somewhere a little more up the chain to see what they've done in the past. Like how have they incorporated members of their living learning community or other communities with faculty involvement into events. And then one of my last tips, definitely keep the collaboration going. So consider when you're going into this event, consider whether you want it to be like a one-time event or a long-standing partnership. So for someone you're reaching out to who's outside of your living learning community, you may be thinking, all right, like here's one idea I have for an event. I want to see how this goes and then move forward, versus someone who has that built-in faculty presence and is really focused on building that continuing partnership that you'll be able to go back to time and time again to really like help students have that really like integrated experience with faculty and our residence hall. And something else when you're going into it, be clear on the time commitments that are involved in a partnership. So for those of you, like I said, that are graduate students, you're probably not working 40 hours a week. So set some time aside when you know you're going to be working with faculty, when you know you're going to have those meetings or the actual time for the event. And then make sure that you're clear with them as well, because they also have a lot going on with different priorities and academics and research. So you want to make sure that they know what they're getting into before you start it. And then like someone said earlier on when we were talking about examples, if it's a single event, meet afterwards and discuss how it went, areas of improvement for the future. And whatever faculty you're working with, they may have some advice moving forward to say like, I really enjoyed this, like you did X, Y, and Z steps, great. Like it really helps the planning process. And then be open to feedback if they have some suggestions of other directions to move in the future. And then definitely, this is where I started and I want to end with this as well. Remember your common goal. So we all want to see students be successful. We want to see them reach graduation and just have these awesome college experiences, even if through our different roles, we go about it in very different ways. So keep this in mind when you experience roadblocks. If you're having a conflict over, how to plan an event or like overall, like how you want to go about this, remember that at the end of the day, you all want to see students be successful. And it's all about finding that event, finding that way to like make that come to fruition to best support them. But also keep in mind, we have our own individual goals and interests as well. So for student affairs, that can tend to be things like building those relationships, helping students form connections with us, with faculty, with each other, and inclusion. So making sure that students feel like they have a place within our residence hall where they can be open, be themselves. And then for academic affairs, definitely those same principles can apply, but some like first goals of a faculty member could be things like their research. That may be why they entered academia in the first place. They are really passionate about their research topic and want to dedicate a lot of time to that. The tenure process, and then service opportunities within the institution. So that could be some of those more traditional things I mentioned, like serving on a search committee, or just like really getting involved with some of the upper leadership, serving on a faculty senate, things that look a little bit different than involvement in a residence hall. Then something that we go back to a lot here in our Division of Student Affairs and Academic Support here at the University of South Carolina, remember your why. So remember why you wanted to work with students in the first place. Remember why you wanted to work with the faculty to plan this event. And that can be a really great guiding tool for you moving forward. So that's everything I had for all of you today. Thank you all so much for attending. I definitely want to open the floor up to questions, comments that anyone has, and see what ideas you have moving forward planning your own event with a faculty member.
Hello, thank you for that, Catherine. My name is Zach Warning. I'm a second-year grad student actually at Auburn University, and so I'm right there with you, about to graduate. It's a great feeling. You mentioned earlier just a little bit about assessment and kind of the parts of working with faculty and programming. How has that looked for you in terms of creating assessment for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we are actually super lucky here at UofSC. We have an awesome assessment team. I think part of that definitely goes with being a larger institution. So one of the major ways we track things like attendance and overall engagement, we have what's called an interaction form. So anytime a resident mentor does an event, they keep down details like how the event went, like what was the goal of the event, what was achieved, like how did students engage, and then we keep a list of attendance. So we as building supervisors are able to go in kind of like into the back end and say, all right, like 450 of our 500 students here within Green Quad have attended an event in this past year. Like, all right, like our students are pretty engaged. So that a lot of it has been like kind of through the department at that point, but like going into the system, seeing the back end. And then I think a lot of like informal assessment as well. So the end of an event, I try to check in with whoever I'm doing the event with and say how do you think it went? Like from your perspective, like did students seem to be interested in this? Like, is it something that's worth doing again? And then even just checking in, like if we have student staff, our resident mentors who are working the event, checking in with them after to say did this seem like something they were interested in? Like, or were they on their phones the whole time? Were they like looking off the screen if it's a virtual event? Just trying to do like a good mix of that formal and informal assessment to gauge student perspectives and those of the people we were working with.
Catherine, would you mind if I jumped in for a sec?
Definitely.
So I also work at USC, and one of the things that happens with those interaction forms is that they are cross-referenced with the attendees for that program. And at the year-end survey, we look to see if there are correlations for gains in the end-of-year survey. And we have a homegrown one done every other year, and in the intervening years, we use EBI and customize some questions to see if those things are matching up.